Hello, and welcome to Makers.dev, episode number 128. It's been a long time coming. Chris, how many times would I have to fold a sheet of paper in order to get 128 layers?
uh, the log of 128, which is 2 to the 7.
2 to 7, correct?
All right.
You passed. You passed my quiz. It's been a while. How have you been?
Yeah.
What's going on?
I've been doing all right. Yeah. I had to remember how to set up my whole setup here. My camera isn't working anymore, so this is on the MacBook. And I realized if I touch my desk, it bounces a lot. So I'm going to try not to touch my desk.
Same.
Yeah.
You succeeded in getting your better microphone set up on. I just gave up and used the quote studio quality microphone built into the MacBook. So lower effort means you're doing it instead of not doing it. Then that's preferable, probably.
But it's been almost a year since not quite, since we last talked, and we got some people on Twitter saying we should do an update for the year in review, maybe. So that's what we're doing.
Yes. Yeah. So the impetus for that is that I have some strong opinions now about Ruby on Rails that I didn't have a year ago.
All right.
After having strong opinions to the contrary. But before we get into that, what have you been doing for the last year? Give me your update. What's going on?
The big thing is that I got a puppy.
Hey.
So, yeah, we have a puppy now. Last we heard, you got a baby and I got a puppy. So
that's right.
Yeah. I don't know. I had a dog growing up and I wanted one, and my wife is like allergic to most dogs, but we got a mini schnauzer, which like has hair instead of fur, so it's less allergic, and she seems to handle it okay. I also bought like 6 air purifiers, so we have like HEPA air purifiers going all the time, which I think also helps.
Do you do the robot vacuum thing too?
No, so I bought like a battery stick vacuum, and I run that more frequently because it's like right in our like dining room. So every time I pass by, I'm like, maybe I should vacuum up, stuff. So maybe that helps as well. I don't know, but
that's good. Lower on the activation energy to do that. I still all the time think about your leaf blower trick.
Yeah.
And my dad, I think I've told you this before, but that's become a meme in our family now of like, is it leaf blower clean? Like we'll go through spaces that's just like leaf blow out. It works.
No,
so
I
well.
totally do it too. Yeah. Now that I have more air purifiers, I'll bring like 3 into a room and then do it also, and it cleans it faster too. Yeah, I do it also.
Yeah. I think there's a market for just taking leaf blowers and white labeling them as electric dusters.
Yeah.
And like the exact same thing, but use a different color of plastic or something so it doesn't look like a real.
Oh, that'd be funny.
Tool.
You could probably make them quieter also and not so big.
Yeah.
You know what? So since we got a dog, we also got one of these high velocity air dryers for the dog that it can heat up the air, but you don't want the air too hot. So like a hair dryer gets too hot often if you turn it on heating for a dog. Anyway, so they sell these high velocity air dryers. That works better than a leaf blower actually, but you have to plug it in, so it's not battery powered.
Okay, well this is the product then. Join our Kickstarter for just take those and like figure out how they're making them. Is it smaller than because the leaf blower is huge?
Yeah, it's smaller. It's like, I don't know, maybe the size of 2 of my heads.
Okay.
Yeah, but it has a cord, so yeah.
Well, Christmas is coming up, Chris. Maybe you could get us a little gift of a cleaner home. How's dog life? Have you found that like your lifestyle has changed at all? Are you going on more walks?
Yeah. So I did not fully internalize because last I had a dog, I also had parents. I mean, I still have parents, but I was living with my parents, and I did not fully internalize like I can never sleep in again, ever. I can try, and my 12-year-old is, I have got him trained to feed the dog and take the dog out, but he kind of only sort of does it, so the dog will like bark, and I'm like, you got to take the dog out, and he's like, I know, so I wish I could sleep in. Other than that, it's been pretty good. It does make me walk more, which is good. That's one of the reasons that I thought it would be good to have a dog, is because then it would make me walk, which it does. So yeah, I mean, in general, it's been good, but it's more work than I remember. So
I'm now a father of a 14-month-old, and I think in the last 14 months, I think I've slept in. I've slept in to my previous standard of sleeping in. I think Sarah would probably say that I sleep in all the time, but to my previous standard of sleeping in, I think I've slept in something like 4 times, and I think 3 of those times were like when I was traveling. And for a conference, and I was like, I would so much rather just miss the first 2 talks than wake up right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is killer because I was past that stage. Like my two kids, they can wake themselves up on Saturday and Sunday now. They can, get themselves like breakfast and everything. So I was like, all right, I get to sleep in on the weekends.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
anymore. Nope.
Until your dog gets old enough to be able to walk himself, herself,
Himself.
feed
Yeah,
himself. Yeah, that's funny. Uh, something. How deep do I want to get into this? So, so my how do I even want to start this topic? My best friend from college loves dogs. He grew up with a dog. He's had dogs now as an adult. Not a fan of children. We'll be out in a public place and he'll be like, just kind of annoyed by the presence of children. He got to meet our daughter for the first time, and he was just kind of like, "Oh yes, a baby," like
Right.
went off and did his own thing. I feel the same way about dogs. So the joke that we've had between us is like the way he feels about children is how I feel about dogs.
Yeah.
I feel like there's something I'm missing about pet ownership. And Sarah, I've had this conversation with Sarah too, because Sarah has had cats her whole life. We have a cat right now, and like I don't think I get it. I don't think I understand specifically with a cat because like I'm a little bit allergic to cats, and like cats, there's just more stuff that the cat needs, and there's like food sometimes spilled over. Like it's only a net annoyance for me being around a pet. Like I don't hate cats. Dogs are fine. And, they're happy, but like I would never choose to live with an animal. I think animals are like outside things, or they like do things for you. But if you have one, and I like, is this me being autistic? Is this like, can you? What am I even trying to say? If you could explain, like, I think there's something I'm not understanding about the feeling that you get having a dog. I think is something that I envy. Like that I've heard Sarah describe it, and it's something that I'd like to be able to experience. But like, there's a disconnect of like, I don't understand why people have dogs. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this right now that are like, "What a psychopath!" I love kids. I think like in hearing how my former roommate in college feels about kids, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's about how I feel about dogs. If you had to, if you were trying to explain to me like what is it about having a dog that like is worth not sleeping? Like any amount of inconvenience for me is like, well, why would you do that? There's zero positive benefit and there's a little bit of negative benefit. So no, don't get the dog. What's the how might you describe that?
Yeah. So well, first I would say I think it's totally normal to have. There's a spectrum of people who like kids. There's a spectrum of people who like dogs, right, or cats or anything. And so like just as much as you like kids and your friend doesn't, I think apply whatever you like about a kid, and some people like dogs exactly that much. I think for a lot of people, it's like I'm trying to remember the comedian who says all you need is two eyes staring back at you. It could be a goldfish, but just find two eyes to stare back at you. And I think that's part of it. Like you just have dogs, especially. So cats, like I had a cat also growing up, and it's like he would disappear for like 24 hours at a time, and we're like, I don't know where you are, and so that's a particular type of animal. Dogs, though, like I walk around and he follows me around, which is often annoying, but is also endearing, right? It's like there's a dog here, like waiting for me to do something, and it's like he's staring at me with his two eyes, and it's like like I'm the person that he follows around, and so I think it's probably that feeling. I would say during the puppy stage, they are incredibly cute, but they are also far more trouble than they're worth. So even at 1 year old, which he is now, he is a lot of work. And so I think if I was going to do it again, I would get like a 2 or 3 year old dog. So they can be near you when you want them to be near you, and they can also kind of go off and do their own thing. I think I feel sort of the same about kids, right? When they're babies, like, yeah, they're cute and cuddly and whatever, but they're so needy, right?
Oh my god, yeah. The infant stage is brutal. They wake up every 2 hours they have to eat every two. I had no idea it was that frequent, but yeah, exhausting.
Yeah,
it's only gotten easier for me. Like
yeah, but you go through that to get to the stage where they are somewhat can do some things on their own, right? And then they're a real person, right? I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Like, specifically with kids, kind of. I want to brush off briefly on that first though. Like the going through that difficult part, I feel like I feel like you can't cheat your way. Like
Right.
if Isabella right now just sort of landed in my life from where I was living a year ago, I don't think I could be a good father for her.
Right.
I think it took that, like, I've transformed, Sarah's transformed into a father and mother that had we not gone through this like infant baby boot camp, I don't know that we could have been the parents that we are now. Like we appreciate so much more of these magical moments of like, oh my god, she just fed herself. This is
Right.
remarkable. And if you just
Right.
dropped me in and like gave me a kid who could feed herself, I'd be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, cool. that's
Yeah.
good. But like the depth of the magicalness of these moments, that it comes from going through the struggle of like, my god, how many bottles did I give her when she's potty trained? Like, how miraculous is that going to feel? Of thinking back of the hundreds and hundreds of diapers that I changed. Of like, oh
Yep.
my god, she can just do that on her own now. And the depth of emotion that I would feel of like, at the same time as feeling grateful for that, sort of this wistful longing of like, oh my god, like the passage of time, and we can't go back to that stage now that she's hit this developmental milestone. Like, that's it. We can't go back to the girl she was before. And looking back at pictures of her, of like, oh my gosh, she used to be so much smaller and so much less capable. Like the bond between us. I've heard people talk about this, and I remember thinking it sounded so cliche, and it's so different actually. Like living through it, but like we formed a bond. And like, oh my god, it's beautiful and amazing. And yeah, I'm curious with your dog, like. I'm reminded of the movie Click with Adam Sandler, where he has the remote where he can just like fast forward through the difficult parts of his life.
Yeah.
And my understanding of the message of that film is like, if you're doing that, you miss the point. Like the point is the struggle. And, if you're only living the highlights become meaningless, because the highlights are only meaningful because they are highlights, because there were worse parts than the highlights that you had to be experiencing through. So,
this is unexpectedly relevant for something we're going to talk about later, I think, which is AI coding.
Oh yeah.
I think the struggle is important. I think AI coding skips over some of the struggle bits, and in the long term is actually bad for programmers.
Yeah, interesting.
But
this is a really good segue, actually. Let's are you okay jumping to that topic?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I find it incredibly ironic that you're getting a master's in machine learning.
Yeah.
And you, I think, don't use AI tools. Like, you don't use ChatGPT, you don't use GitHub Copilot.
So I do a little bit, kind of like a hyper search. So like for things that I would search, I have found ChatGPT to be sometimes better at summarizing things. Yeah.
Okay. But you characterize it as like you're waiting for a consensus of like, this is the best tool, and this is the, like, you don't want to waste your time experimenting with intermediate tools before it actually gets good.
Yeah. So I find my current workflow for a lot of things very effective, and I see a lot of people playing around with a lot of tools and toys, and I do not see a clear way that I know that they're better. And so for now, it is more effective for me to stay doing my thing. I think this is my MO, like for most things. Like, I kind of stick with the thing I know works for a while. And there's a lot of things that come and go. And then eventually there's a clear winner. And then I go to that, which is funny because like I'm on the cutting edge of a lot of things. But in terms of my workflow, I try to stick with what I know works. Yeah.
Do you write code as part of your role at Google?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're writing code, you use GitHub Copilot, or
Nope.
like you might bounce to OpenAI to do a search on something, or
not for coding. No.
Not for coding. You're just typing into a keyboard.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, like a Neanderthal. Yeah, I mean, I still use this classic Google search and find Stack Overflow examples. I mean, that's yeah.
I'm fascinated by this. So okay, here's so like you're still using an editor though. You're like Sublime or what editor do you use?
So I use Sublime, and then there's also an internal Google editor that is has knowledge of the whole Google code base, and so I use that too.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had that. That's neat.
And they're also building. I mean, they've talked about this publicly. Like, they're building a lot of AI tools into that editor, and I just don't like them very much.
Yeah.
But don't let my bosses hear that. Yeah.
I understand. Like, I don't like IDEs because I feel like IDEs are doing too much work for you, and like the autocomplete gets in the way and that sort of thing. And as a general philosophy, like, the point where you're at now is such an abstraction on top of an abstraction of
Yeah.
what coding used to be. Like you're no longer, moving wires around on a switchboard, and then the abstraction on top of that was like, we have these punch cards that you can just have this dynamic program that you punch in and then you feed them in, and you don't have to hard code it. And then the abstraction on top of that was, oh my gosh, how amazing is this? We can just type code in, and it's assembly, or I'm not sure what the next step was. It might have been like zeros and ones that you were typing in, like the analog of what you're doing in the punch cards, and then on and on and on until we're at the level that you're at of this abstraction on top of this pile of abstractions of you can type this abstracted higher level language into Sublime, or the Google editor, but you don't like that, and that's taking care of all those lower layers for you. When I look at that stack of abstractions, I see it as inevitable of like, well, we're just going to get more abstractions ad infinitum on top of that. And the obvious next abstraction on top of that for me is, instead of you typing characters into the editor, or even like maybe a half step above that, which is maybe what IDEs would do of like code completion and that sort of thing. When I code now, probably like 95% of my coding is I explain in words the changes that I want made, and they're done almost perfectly. And that's incredible. Like the oh my gosh, I've been doing a lot more outsourcing, like working with other people, and the sort of description that I would be giving to a human person if I was hiring them, like that's the level that I'm able to interact with these AIs with. And so, like, if you're waiting for a time to jump over to it, like now is the time. It's incredible. Try it at least. Like Cursor in particular, I think Cursor is the best one. It's removed enough of the friction that like it's so if you're just working with an LLM, an easy way to do that might be, you take your code, you copy and paste it into ChatGPT, or Anthropic is actually a slightly better model, and you ask it for the change you want to make, and then it prints out what the change is, and then you're looking at that version in your own code, and then you do the diff between them, you copy whatever the lines are. Cursor smooths over the friction of sending your code out because it already has the context. Like, when you're chatting with it, it's an inline chat that has context of what your current code is. You can bring in multiple files if you want. So instead of having to copy and paste your code out, it's just always there. And then they've also reduced the friction coming in because they can do these automatic code diffs. So I'm looking at right now this example that I did. I said, please update this, meaning this. It was an endpoint, a GET request that returned JSON for the most recent version of a that doesn't matter. Most recent version of a thing.
Right.
And I said, please update this to work with paths like, and then I added a query parameter to it. And that was the important part of the update. So I typed in that sentence. That took me like, 20 seconds. And from that, it printed out what the change needed to be made. And then it, in the code, like showed me what the change was as a diff, as if I'm looking at like a GitHub feature request, GitHub PR. So like the work for me to do was I hit Command L to go into the chat, and I typed that sentence and I hit enter. And then it showed me what the new code was. And then I hit a play button next to the code. And then it showed me the diff. And then I hit Command Enter to accept it. And that's it. And like I can just go so much faster. It's like I have a team of like instantly available programmers who are like simultaneously junior and senior to me. It's this strange dynamic of like sometimes it knows more than me and sometimes it makes these stupid mistakes. I'm like, no, don't do that. But it's remarkable. It's like the next step from this, I think, is just going to be that we're like having spoken conversations with the code, and maybe the code is off to the side, but I'm not necessarily concerned with the actual details of it. I'm more concerned with like writing test cases, and then making requests of it. I'm like, make this button a little bit bigger, and then it's doing that. Like we're very, very close to that. So yeah, I think we're there. I think it's time to to join the future, old man. Like we're coding with LLMs.
I'll be the resident old man. I have 3 maybe counterpoints. So to be fair, I am not against using AI coding tools. I just don't think. Well, here's my rebuttal to maybe some of that. The first is that we do have a level of abstraction above just writing straight JavaScript code, which is modules, or in Ruby you have gems or whatever. And I think one thing I've seen is LLMs not reach for those or come up with ones that don't exist. fast enough. And so, as an example, I was watching this one person do a demo, and the LLM coded him up an auth system uh, from scratch. Auth systems are not something you want to be coding from scratch. Like you want a very battle tested third package auth system. So I think there's some of that going on. And so I think if you just go straight to the LLM every time, then you're probably skipping over packages that are well tested for LLM code that might have bugs. Do you have headphone problems?
Oh, okay. Oops, my headphones just died. I missed what you said, but it sounded like you said something funny.
Oh, okay. I don't remember what funny thing I said, but I was saying there's an abstraction above just writing code, which is using third-party packages, right? And I haven't seen LLMs be very good yet at selecting the proper third-party package, importing it, and using it. I've seen a little bit of that. Maybe it's better now. I haven't tried in, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. But I'd like to see more of that so that it doesn't reinvent the wheel, because like I gave the example of auth systems, like it's very easy to get auth systems wrong. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I am not, even though you're going faster in the short term, I'm not convinced that for long-lived projects it's going to be much better, because I think there still is the opportunity to introduce subtle bugs that you don't understand. So you have LM write all this code for you, and there's a bug buried in it deeply somewhere. And since you didn't write it, maybe you didn't, thoroughly vet it as much as you would have if you wrote it yourself. And then so later there might be subtle bugs that creep in. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is, for me personally, I write 2 types of code currently. The first is, in my job, I write a lot of external code, so code seen by other developers. And I don't necessarily want, and it's mostly short samples. So I don't necessarily want to, like I need to own every line of that code that goes out to the world. So I need to make sure that I know exactly what it does and that I approve of it, basically. And then the other type of code I write is like for my masters or for Kaggle, like AI code is extremely, there's a lot of boilerplate, but I just copy and paste that. Like it's all the same all the time anyway. And then the actual algorithm parts it's very, very easy to get very small bugs that throw your output way off. And it's extremely difficult to debug. And so an LLM is no faster, because like if an LLM produces something that looks about right, and then in the end it doesn't work, I have to go through every single line anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are my rebuttals. I said.
Yeah, solid counter argument. So to reiterate that, you found in practice that LLMs are bad at knowing when to import libraries as opposed to implement things from scratch, like writing an authentication system from scratch. It makes code harder to maintain in the long term.
Maybe I think that's to be determined, but yeah,
sure. You want to make sure that you're owning every line of code, like for your job when you write code and doing code samples. You want to make sure that you're not hallucinating. I've had this happen several times. LLMs can hallucinate what the API should be, but it's not actually working like that. So yeah, that can get you into more trouble. And then for the coding that you do, like for Kaggle, there is some boilerplate that an LLM would be good at, but that's not a big benefit, because you're going to copy and paste it anyway. And then for the part that you actually need to spend time on with your brain, it's easy to get small bugs that can throw the output way off. So it's not worth the trouble. Like then it'll create, if it creates subtle bugs and you're not understanding every single line of code and what's happening, then you're going to be in trouble.
Yep.
Is that a fair representation of that?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. All right, let me counter those counters.
All right.
Hold on. Postgres. What the heck was it called? Stored. That wasn't stored queries. Sub queries.
Stored procedures.
It's not stored procedures. It's when you say using at the top, and then you can do like queries beforehand. What the heck is that called?
I don't know.
This might actually prove my point. Hold on, table that for right now, because I'll go back there. So on the point of not using libraries, this to me is a tuning problem at the level of, like, if you were working with a junior developer and you noticed the junior developer was trying to implement their own auth system, junior developers are very coachable. You can say, like, hey, for this category of thing, use a library. Here are the sorts of libraries I'd expect you to use. LLMs are receptive in the exact same sort of way. And if you find that, like, there's a particular style that you want to lean an LLM more in a particular direction, you do that once, you like add it to your base prompt, and then it's never a problem again. So that one to me is trivial. If you just say, like, perhaps just the sentence, lean towards importing libraries as opposed to implementing your own logic. Or you might fine tune that even further and say, like, here are some standard libraries that I like to use for solving these sorts of problems. Lean on these when it would make sense.
Do you find that it actually correctly finds libraries and uses them? Because last I tried it, it just hallucinated everything. Like it imported libraries that didn't exist.
It's gotten so much better. Yeah.
Okay.
Like the understanding of how to use the libraries. People have come up with all sorts of clever techniques also of like, in Cursor in particular, you can import documentation for libraries. So like it knows all the latest documentation for Next.js. It knows all the latest documentation for Rails, and it can pull in documentation for any particular library you're using. It used to hallucinate a lot more. Like, a year ago, the last time we talked, it would hallucinate function calls that to me make perfect sense. But it's just kind of writing code that looks like it should make sense. But yeah, it's close to flawless now in its ability to do that. And when it's not, the workflow is like you copy and paste what the error was and paste it in, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, my mistake. That's not actually how it works. And then usually the second or third time, it's able to actually fix it. So that's my counter to no libraries. Any counters to my counter to your counter?
No, I mean, it sounds like I have to try it again. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying you have to. I recommend. Like, it's.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm not going to force you to do this. I would like to present the argument that like it might be worth your time to try it again. The second thing you said is it's bad in the long term, and certainly. So kind of combining this and the problem of like the algorithm putting in small bugs that throw your output way off. I got into trouble because I was writing. So I had this project that was on Firebase that I moved to Supabase because it needed a relational database, and that was like an easy transition to go through. And one of the so Supabase is this serverless platform, which was appealing to me at first. We'll get into this when I talk about Rails, but like, the hidden complexity there is that they want you to write a lot more code that lives in the database layer. And so as part of that, I find myself writing these much more complicated queries where like in Rails, I might just split up the query and do two different queries and then kind of merge the data together. You can't do that as well in Supabase. It really incentivizes you to have everything in these stored procedures, these RPC is the acronym. I forgot what it stands for.
Remote procedure calls?
Remote procedure calls sounds right, yeah. Basically, it's like you can be doing more logic. Writing in SQL, which is wild. It's a crazy language, but like you can write programs with SQL, and it's immensely powerful because like you can do queries and joins, and it's all happening in the table. It can be very fast. But the trouble that I got into was there was a feature of SQL that I had never seen before, where you can say, I think it's either using or with is the main keyword, and then you write a whole query, and then you put a comma after that, and then you can like keep building on those blocks, and then finally you write like the actual query that you want to do, and then you can reference those previous tables. And what it's doing behind the scenes is like wrapping all that up so that it's one giant big spaghetti query, but like the syntactic sugar on it is that you can treat it as if you're running this query first and then this other query second. So I didn't understand that syntax. I didn't understand what was actually happening, and like behind the scenes, I hadn't yet taken Aaron Francis's course on how databases work, and I just kind of skipped over that. And I wish I could remember what that was called. It's not stored procedures. It's like blocked weird. I might include
Aaron Francis is yelling at the screen right now.
I know, he knows exactly what the term is. So yeah, I was trying to wrestle with this query where I had this giant list of visits. Every visit you can think of as like a browser has hit a web page, and I was trying to abstract on top of that. I want to see per visitor the first page that they visited and the last page that they visited, and if they have ever entered an email address, I want to see the most recent email address. It just like it was a hard abstraction to reason about from this table of all visits. And so I started off by just saying to the LLM, like, hey, here's the result that I want, and here's my table, so do it. And it did, but then debugging it was impossible because it spit out this code that had all these using things. I didn't know what they were doing. I just knew that like it was giving the right output. So yeah, it was like impossible to debug. And I probably burned, I don't know, like a month trying to just kind of limp along of, it's broken in this way now. And then it got into this weird state where it was like oscillating between these two things. And I was like, no, that one doesn't work. Remember? Because this other thing, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, my fault. You should use this other thing. I'm like, no, that's the second thing you said. We've just been going through these two things. Like that's not working. So I use all this to say, like, this does not remove. I think there's a promise of sort of an extension of this no code movement that like
Mm.
even if you're non-technical, you can just pick up tools like Cursor and cheat your way to building a $1 billion app, and you can't do that yet. We might get there eventually, but I think there's always going to be an advantage to people who have a deeper understanding of what the technical layers are doing than someone who has no understanding what the deeper layers doing. So like that's going to remain a problem. The LLMs are not a solution for not knowing how systems work. It's a way to move faster in the same way that like when punch cards were introduced on this ladder of abstraction, you still need to understand what the punch cards are doing. You still need to understand what that lower level is. It just lets you move faster. Like it's not going to solve these higher level design decisions for you. Although it can be a very good consultant in that. If you want to chat with an LLM about, here's the sort of problem I'm having. It's this higher level design, and that these things keep failing. LLMs are perfectly capable of introducing to you like, perhaps you should follow test driven development as a thing. And I can help you with those next steps of actually, here's some testing frameworks I recommend. And, I can even write the test for you, but you still need to be thinking. Like you
Right.
still have to have that sort of high level, long term planning. LLMs are getting much better at the long term planning, and I think it's only going to improve. But like, it's not yet removed the human from the system, and I don't think it will for a long time. I think humans who understand what the lower layers are doing will always have an advantage over humans who don't. And eventually, I think that's going to be minimized. Like, my brother-in-law can take an entire car apart and put it back together. He, back in the early days of cars, he would have a huge advantage over someone who had no technical knowledge of cars. It used to be that like you had to have that level of technical knowledge to be able to drive a car. And through automation and automatic transmissions and making cars much easier to use, anyone can use a car. My brother-in-law Patrick still has an advantage over people who don't know how to use the car. When the car breaks, he knows how to fix it, and normal people don't. But like because of this automation, because of these layers of abstraction, we've enabled more people to be able to use this technology. And he's still able to take advantage of things like impact drivers instead of having to just use wrenches. But if you just gave an impact driver to someone who doesn't know how a car works, that's just going to help them like make a mess faster. You still have to have that the technical expertise to be able to fully understand the system. So that's my counter to your point number two, that they're bad.
I think in the car example, I think the LLM sort of corollary is electric cars, because they're much, much simpler in terms of mechanical like stuff. Like if a motor breaks, you get a new motor. Like people aren't fixing motors. If a battery breaks, you get a new battery. And so there's only a handful of things you can switch. Now, I still think your brother has a big advantage because he knows exactly how, like the tires are the same. The steering is, well, it's all steer by wire now, so that's different, I guess. But like there are parts of the car that are the same, and so he still has an advantage. But it's just becoming much less important to have such a deep knowledge of, say, engines. But I think that'll exist for another 100 years. I mean, people will be driving, like manual sports cars around tracks for years and years and years, I think.
Yeah.
So, I think there's an interesting corollary there. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I think my main point is like, yes, that's still a problem, but if you're expecting an LLM currently to solve all of your thinking for you, it's a tool to go faster. It's not a tool to.
Right.
Your point was that it's bad in the long term if you're like totally leaning on it, and I think my counter to that is like if you're leaning on it that much, you're using the tool incorrectly. You still need to have that level of understanding.
I think a lot of people are expecting you to use the tool incorrectly. Maybe that's my point. A lot of people are expecting that this will start replacing software engineers, and you just need like one, like maybe system architect to like manage the whole thing.
Right.
I do not see that yet. Yeah.
I think what I've personally found is like I'm currently in this position right now, actually, because with Rootabl, that we'll talk about later, I was working with someone as a consultant, and I realized that working with them was taking up more of my time than it would have been to just use Cursor and do the changes. And this was someone that I was paying, I think $90 or $100 an hour to make these changes. And so, like, in a very real sense, that's like in my anecdotal experience, that has happened. Like, I'm not hiring someone because these tools have gotten so good. And the friction there, when you're dealing with human, it's you still have to communicate with them, and we were doing video calls, and writing descriptions and like managing the Asana board. Like, there's a lot of friction that goes along with a human. And then there's a huge lead time of like the asynchronous communication, that sort of thing. And it's faster and easier for me just to go to the spot in code and hit Command L and type out what I want and hit enter, and then boom, it's done. And I might write a test and I might just test it, but like that, it's a much shorter feedback loop. And now I'm not hiring that person. That doesn't mean that this person no longer has a job. Like they're still working. But like the tide has risen all boats. Like me and this other person are able to get more done now. That
I think the goal is to get that person using your workflow, right? And then then you can actually double your output. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But you still need a human on top. And like,
right.
I found myself in situations where I'm managing people who are using these AI tools, and then I just feel like a rock star because I'm like, I send a text to someone, and then they are able to implement a whole feature and then pop back up. Like that's been really cool. Okay. So that was the point number 2. Kind of also tied into that you want to own every line of code. I may have addressed every point I wanted to make, actually, that like, you still need to be responsible for the output, especially in your role. You're writing code for engineers. It still needs to make sense.
Which could happen. Like I could review LLM's code and like put it out there, right? But in that case, I've come so far with my workflow. Like it's about the same for me to write the line of code or read the line of code and understand it. Mm-hmm. Maybe not, but I don't know. In very short code examples, I don't see the point. Yeah,
I hear that. Yeah, I'm curious if you actually try it in practice. Because if nothing else, like it types faster than you can, even for short lines of
code. So this is another thing. I've had a lot of I've heard a lot like the faster you type, the better kind of developer you are. Which I don't know. I've known great developers who type really slowly. Like you have to think more than you type in development. Now it can also think faster than me, which I think is the very interesting point. I don't know.
Yeah. Can it think better than you? Not always. Sometimes.
Yeah.
A workflow that I've found works incredibly well is specifically if it's a problem that works well with test-driven development. So if I'm UI things are a little trickier, but like if I'm writing a library to very simple, straightforward, like there's input and there's output, and I need to validate the output. LLMs in a TDD workflow, a test-driven development workflow, are killer because I describe to it what I want the system to look like. I have it write the tests for me. I look over the tests and be like, yep, that is what I want. Or like, oh no, actually, this other thing should be changed. And then I pop over to the model and I say, okay, make the test pass. And then it does. And like, that's just magical. Because I'm not writing any code. I'm just describing what I want the system to look like. And at the end of it, like I get a really good test case. And, at the end of all of it, I can say, okay, this code is currently passing all these tests. Refactor it because this code is kind of messy, and then it does, and it's beautiful. And like in 20 minutes, I'm able to get done what would have taken me from scratch hours.
So this is another interesting point, which is kind of based on how the type of code I usually write, and this is where I may definitely get left behind, which is I often figure out what I'm developing as I'm developing it. Mm-hmm. So like in your case, you know what it's going to do. You write the tests. LLM writes the code. Mm-hmm. I rarely know exactly what something's going to do. I have to like do a first pass and then change 2 lines, then change 3 lines, and then change 4 lines just to know what I want the code to do.
Yeah.
Which I guess I could also tell the LLM, but like if I'm changing 2 lines at a time, like again, it's like faster for me to write the 2 lines than it is to write 4 sentences about those 2 lines.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. It might be that LLMs aren't yet well suited for the workflow of doing this sort of Kaggle thing because the cost of writing the line of code is pretty small. And then my understanding of what you're doing is, you write a lot of code and then hit execute, and then the results of that might take hours or days. So you really have to think about what the result is. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with that workflow. Like most of the stuff I'm doing is making websites where the feedback loop is much faster. It's much easier to validate and quicker to validate.
The thing I have definitely found LLMs helpful for is, like I talked about, this sort of advanced searching type of thing. So like for Kaggle competition, for example, you could like import the whole Kaggle competition and you could say, what kind of algorithm should I use for this? Mm-hmm. And it'll give you some really good examples. And that is faster than, reading 10 papers and trying to figure out what you should do, for sure. So that's how I use it, I guess, more.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the strongest argument I could make for why it might be worth your time for trying out these tools. I would recommend, in particular, Cursor, and I would recommend
a lot of things about Cursor.
I actually hate the editor part of it. I really don't like VS Code, and I can't figure out why. It might be that it's slow. It's a little bloated. There's just a little too many things in it.
So VS Code is interesting because you can change absolutely everything about it. It's
Yeah.
an Electron app, at least it was last I checked, and
Yeah.
you can actually change the JavaScript and CSS for the whole thing.
Yeah.
So if you want to get rid of like almost everything, if you want to completely change how it works, you can. Now that might take, that's like getting into Vim or Emacs and like, super customizing it. So maybe that's not a great,
Yeah.
just find an editor that actually works. But you can, if you don't like something about VS Code, you can absolutely just change it.
It feels wrong, and I don't know how to say that. Like Sublime feels right, and
yeah, I like Sublime too.
I tried Zed. Zed is starting to implement more of these cursor features. The core innovation of cursor to me is this. I hit a keyboard shortcut and I have the LLM chat right on the side, and then I ask it for a change, and then I can implement a code diff, and it's doing the diff, and then I can accept it. And that's a feature that I think is probably going to be brought to every editor. They do really nice code diffs, like it looks like a diff, and I think that might be a technical limitation of some editors. But like, I don't like VS Code, but I really like that feature. And so as soon as Sublime or Zed, I really like Zed feels right. It might be like the refresh rate or the responsiveness of it. I don't know. Yeah. So the color scheme isn't quite right. I don't know.
Yeah, it is an Electron app, so it does run slightly slower than native apps.
And Zed, I think, is doing a bunch of crazy stuff with running on the GPU, where like every layer is a different shader or something crazy. So Zed feels good, and VS Code and Cursor don't. Yeah. But VS Code, like the Cursor chat, is just so good that I'm able to tolerate it because I'm barely actually writing code in it. So yeah,
right.
But I just don't like the theme also of like the way that it does the tree of the files. It doesn't feel right to me.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know why. It would be like, I think part of the difficulty I'm having is I understand I can customize everything about it, but I don't know what the things are that need to be customized for it to feel right.
Yeah.
Like I just want it to be Sublime, but to have this chat feature, if I could point to like, oh, it's the icons for the folders don't look right. Okay, yeah, then I can change that. Okay, that was our whole thing about LLMs. Right. This is going to be a long episode. How are you doing on time?
I'm doing all right. I got a meeting at 2. We're good. We're
meeting at 2. Is that in? That's in 2 hours.
2 hours. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Do a 3-hour long episode. All right.
Let's do it. It's been a year. I feel like we got a lot to talk about. That was LLMs. I want to keep going down your list of stuff for updates. You're working at Google, and you've been working at Google now for like
2 years.
What do we get? That's amazing. Yeah, great. How's that going? I've before you tell me, I've had several fantasies over the last few months of like, my life would be so much simpler if I was just working for a big company and just getting the paycheck. It would just be so nice. So, I found myself thinking about you a lot. But how's that been going?
I have found that I have enjoyed that aspect of it tremendously. Yeah. There are big company problems, right? But of big companies, Google's a good one. And it is, I very much enjoy getting a paycheck right now. I don't think that will be forever, right? But like right now, like my family has a ton of stuff going on. I got 2 kids who are like every single night we have something going on that I got to get them to, like I do not have. Oh, and I was doing my master's, which is over in 1 week. I took a quiz this weekend and then I'm done. Yeah. But yeah, so I was doing that. So like I just did not have the time to like do the independent thing and do all the other stuff that I'm doing. So that's nice. In a different phase of life, I think that will be different. But right now I am enjoying the paycheck. Yeah, for sure.
If you could talk about it, I'm curious of some of the big company problems that you don't like.
Oh, stuff like stuff you would expect. Like there's 7 layers of management, right? So to get anything important done, you have to go up and down the chain. You have to work around other people's schedules for things like, if stuff takes 4 meetings to get done, that's probably 1 meeting a week for a month instead of, like just chatting over the day or something. The other thing that's interesting is Google, I think any big company, but Google especially, my manager said it will take as much time as you give it. And so you have to be very thoughtful about saying no to things that are not like, people will just like continue to give you work if you keep asking for it. And so like, you have to figure out how to manage your workload, which I think most people do pretty well. Like it's you can have a very good work-life balance, but you have to be intentional about it. What else? Oh, stuff like the last 2 years they've had layoffs, right? And so it's like, no, maybe I'll get laid off. That's always in the back of your head.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. There are moments where I feel like that would be preferable to the sorts of problems I have
Yeah.
now. Especially one of the things I want to talk about is this consulting job that I have, and
Mm.
like consulting can be really nice
Yeah.
because this job in particular was a whole bunch of money, and I outsourced almost all of the work for it. And so that's kind of a dream because I was just having like a call once a week and making sure at a high level things were being orchestrated correctly, and that was going well. But then there's a lot of stressful parts of it of like, oh, it's due in a week, and
Right.
these big things aren't done, and I'm relying on these other people, and like, do I need to jump in and start helping with that? And oh, the my costs were much higher than I was projecting. Like these people took a lot more time to do these things than I thought was going to take, and so that's like directly coming off of my profit margin of like how much money
Right.
I'm making for this thing, and it's just a lot more to think about. Where yeah, I think I'm in a season of my life right now of just simplifying, trying to pare down the number of concerns that I have and the number of responsibilities that I have, so that I can really just really nail the responsibilities that I am taking ownership of. And so the idea that I could just get a paycheck from a bigger company and not have to worry about like where are customers coming from,
Right.
like
Yep.
how am I doing marketing, and like the app is down and I have to bring it back up, or I have to find someone to be managing this for me, and customer support and taxes, and like to be able to abstract all of that away and like just show up and just do my job and not feel bad about having strict boundaries between work and life, because like Google's not gonna Google's not gonna go into bankruptcy because like
Right.
you're finishing your day at 5 p.m. Like they're gonna be just fine. Yeah, there have been many moments where I've wistfully thought about how appealing that might be.
Yeah.
Uh,
I wish I could kind of have both. Like, I wish I could have this nice job half-time and then do
mm,
which you can. That's what I did for contracting a lot. Um, but I don't know how to do it without contracting. Like, I would
mm,
contract at halftime for a lot of gigs, and that was really nice. Um, but you still have a lot of the problems that you talked about. Like, contracts only last so long. So you got to, you still have to do taxes. You still have to worry about legal stuff. You still have to worry about, payroll or whatever. Yeah. So, yeah.
cool. Okay, that's good one.
Yeah.
It's possible. I showed you work for the man
All right.
at some point, but not yet. And then I'm excited about your masters. One quiz away from the masters.
Yeah.
What's the plan? What actually? I'm curious what the quiz is. What are
It
you being
is,
quizzed on?
instead of a final test, it's just a single, like we had a quiz per module. So I'm in one class. I purposely saved a relatively easy class for the last one.
Mm.
So I'm in a relatively easy class this quarter, and there's one quiz left. So this is it's PSRUU, planning, searching, and reasoning under uncertainty. Yes,
Okay.
it's a long course title, but it's like, say you're a robot and you're in a hallway. How do you know where you are? How do you plan your route? How do you get to where you're going? Or the program assignments we had, a lot of them were games. So like, you have a piece that you can move around. How do you optimally move it around to try to win the game? That type of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Cool. What's the quiz?
I don't know because I haven't studied for it yet. So
Gotcha.
I have 1 week. I have one more module to watch. It will be something about planning and searching. So yeah.
What's the sort of assignment that you might have for this class? Like, are you given a task like there's a robot that has to go through a maze, figure out a
Yeah,
high
yeah.
level
So
strategy, or are you
a lot
programming
of
the
the
robot?
assign. Oh yeah. So a lot of the assignments built on the same core game. It was a lot of them were game based. You could think of them like robots, but instead they're pieces.
Okay.
And so it was like, it's called something to track. I don't know. Your pieces can move like knights, like chess knights, and then you have a ball on one of the pieces that you could pass between them in a straight line. And the idea is to get the ball to the other side of the board, and the other player is playing as well and can block you. So like you can't pass a ball through another piece. Yeah, and so that's the basic setup of the game. And there are different levels that we built eventually trying to, actually play the game and beat it. They made it easy. You didn't start from the beginning. You started sort of from half game, which made it much easier because the search space is a lot smaller if you start halfway through a game. My algorithm would fail miserably if it had to do it from scratch. So that was nice. But yeah, so that was several of the courses, and then there's several of the assignments, and there's different, algorithms basically you had to implement for each thing. There's I don't know, a dozen different algorithms that could solve it, and they wanted you to use specific ones. So
Can the pieces move while they're holding the ball, or they can only?
No, they're
Okay.
fixed. Yeah.
Okay. How many pieces do you have on board?
Okay, so it's an 7x8 board. So you have 6 pieces. No, 5 pieces. So
Okay.
yeah.
So and are both players playing offense and defense, or one player's
Yep.
playing defense the other? Okay.
Yep. Both players
That's,
have balls, and
that's
whoever gets
fascinating.
the ball to the end first wins.
What an interesting game. Is this based on anything, or did they make it up for this
Yeah,
class?
yeah, it's a real game. You can buy it. It's like a wooden. It looks like a chessboard, and
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Cool. I'm curious about playing that game. Okay. Cool. I'm reminded also of a game that I saw on TikTok where it's each player has one piece, and the goal and something like eight or nine walls that you can put on the board, and a wall covers 2 spaces, and each player is trying to get to the opponent's back row. And on your turn, you can either move your piece forward, backward, left, right, or jump over the opponent's piece if you're right next to each other, or you can place a wall. And you can't make it impossible. There has to be a path for the other player to get to the other wall. But it's this interesting game of like trying to like move in a way where you're costing your opponent more moves than you're expending.
Right.
So you wouldn't want to place a wall in a way that the other player can just like hop around it and only burned 1 turn because now you've lost a wall and you're back to where you started. So yeah, that's been interesting. So I suppose any sort of game would be a way that you could.
Yeah, you could do chess. In fact, there's a Kaggle competition right now, which is chess, but chess has been solved a million times. So the way they're making it interesting is you only get 10 seconds per game. You can only use some number of megabytes of RAM, and you only get like 64 kilobytes of upload or something like that. And so it's like super constrained. Your solver has to be super constrained.
That seems to be fun. Like I would watch a tournament of chess games like that if it was happening in like 10 seconds. That'd be really cool. Okay, so that's the quiz, and then bumping up to a higher level. You're almost done with your masters. Congratulations, almost. That's so exciting. We've talked about this several times, but like, what's the plan of once you have it? Like, what are you going to do?
So I could move internally at Google into a team that would use more of it. That's certainly an option. I could just have it, and like the reason I got it is to understand the stuff I was doing better, and I think it accomplished that. So that's good. I'm going to take a break from working as hard because I've been doing classes and 40 hours of work a week, which is a lot. So I'm going to
take up woodworking or something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, probably like clean my house. My office is disaster because I just never have time to clean it. I'm either working, in here working, or in here doing like solving a programming assignment. So I'm yeah. So probably do some cleaning and stuff. Check back in with me after the holidays.
Okay, I will. That's exciting. That'll be a big load up. I find I'm reminded of there's a parable of a man who goes to the village elder and says like, oh, my house is too small. My hut, is it's my wife and 3 kids and just not enough space. And the village elder says, do you have chickens? The guy says, yeah, I do. And he says, bring the chickens into your house and then come see me next week. He's like, what are you talking about? Bring the chickens. Just trust the process.
Yeah.
So he does, comes back the next week and he looks a little more haggard and he's like, this is terrible. The chickens are like all jumping up on the tables and running into them when you walk. What do I do now? And he says, do you have goats? The guy says, oh, no. And he says, bring the goats into the house and see me next week. So he does and comes back getting bored of shoveled and like his clothes are dirty. He's like, this is awful. The goats are bumping into stuff and breaking all our stuff. And the chickens still are running around and there's even less space than before. And the village elder says, do you have cows? And he says, oh, no, we have 1 cow. And the elder says, bring the cow in and see me next week. And he does. And he's a mess. His eyes are all bloodshot. It's like the cow keeps mooing in the middle of the night and chewing our pillows. And this is terrible. And the elder says, okay, take all the animals and bring them out of the house. And the guy sees him next week. And he's just beaming. And he's like, oh my God, it's so nice. Our hut is so spacious. There's like, it's just me and my wife and our 3 kids. And like, it's so quiet and it's so nice. Thank you so much. That's the sort of feeling that I get removing responsibilities from my life. And then it kind of like, things tend to fill up. And I'm envious of you about to remove this big time and attention sink from your life because your life's about to feel so much more spacious.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
I have some things that I love to talk to you about.
Let's do it. we took an hour on my stuff, and you have the more interesting
We're taking
update
2 hours
segments.
on my stuff. Let's go.
Let's do it.
One thing I just want to briefly touch on is fatherhood is incredible. Isabella is 14 months old, and we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about pets, but like I just feel like a different person. Like, man, I don't know how to talk about this without sounding trite and cliche, but like I didn't realize what it was going to feel like to know that I would sacrifice my life for this person, like
Yep.
without really thinking about it. If there was a car speeding up to her, like it would feel good to like run into traffic and throw her out and like get hit by the car myself. And I had heard people talk about that, but it's so different. Like actually feeling that deep in my bones. It's I feel like Sarah and I have both talked about this, that we feel like we've leveled up as people. Gosh, there's so much I could say here. It might be better just to leave it at that. But like, I'm so happy that we had kids. I had a kid, and God willing, planning on more. But what a remarkable experience. What a it's just like a deeper way to live, and a leveling up of responsibility and my capability as a human. And it's I understand the argument of people who there's like this child-free movement of people who intentionally aren't having kids by choice. And my current take on that, before having kids, I think I would hear people saying things like this who had kids, and I think part of me was kind of suspicious of like, well, of course you have to say that because like you have kids, you can't go back on that now. So
Right.
like being a hostage and falling in love with your kidnapper, like you kind of have to justify that it's going well. And like maybe, but also it doesn't matter. Like, I so much more prefer this, and I would not want to go back. And there's more stuff I need to do, and there's more responsibility I have, and I feel like it's made me a better person. And yeah, I could make the argument of like why you might want to not have kids, but the argument to me is so much stronger for having kids. Yeah, it's a lot of my friends from college didn't have kids, and like don't plan to have kids. And like the way that I'm currently thinking about that is just that I feel so sad that there's so many people who are intentionally choosing not to experience this when they could. Uh, yeah,
It, it's
that's
interesting because they may feel the same way about you never having a dog.
for sure.
So
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, I think there's a wide variety of experiences, and yeah, but I agree. It's having kids has completely changed me and has made me appreciate things that I didn't before. Yeah, but I also totally understand the no kid movement. Like kids are a ton of work and they're
For
so
sure,
expensive.
for sure. It's a different life
And
you live in. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
All of a sudden,
uh,
it's interesting for us to just like go to a place and
yeah,
be there in a nice, boring, safe place, and then
right.
go home. Like that's an exciting evening out for us now.
Yeah, my
And
wife and I
before it
used
was
to
like
take
let's fly to Rome and be there for a month. And
right.
yeah,
Yeah, we would take dates to Target. We would just like just go to Target and walk around.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I used to hear people saying that and think like, how sad is that you don't get to experience this like exciting, like I'm going rock climbing
right.
and stuff. And it's so like it's wonderful to go on a date to Target now. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, and yeah, I think you're correct that like people who are dog people would look at how I'm living and feel sad about that I never experienced that. And I
yeah,
agree with them. Like I feel envious of
yeah,
the sort of joy that you get from having a dog. And I do feel like that's a thing that that's an experience that I don't get to experience in my life. I'm red green colorblind, and so
mm,
in the same sort of way, it's proto-anomalia. So like I can still differentiate between most shades of green and most shades of red, but I've come to understand that like I think the color red is much more vibrant for other people than it is for me.
okay.
Like Sarah's able to pick out this happens specifically with when cooking steak. I'll
Mm,
cook steak and I'll be like, oh yeah, this is cooked, and I'll give some to Isabella, and Sarah will be like, that's raw. Like we cannot feed our daughter raw steak. And to me, like if I really look at it, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can kind of
right.
see how that's more pinkish than gray. But I think for her, it like stands out. So in the same sort of way, like
Yeah,
that's an experience that is inaccessible to me, and I envy that experience. That'd be that'd be really cool to be able to experience more vibrancy and colors. It'd be really cool to experience the emotional connection and companionship from a dog. And yeah, I don't currently know how to access those things. And in the same sort of way, for people who decide not to have kids, there's plenty of great reasons not to have kids. I feel sad that they, oh my God, just like in a typical day, there's like 6 moments per day where I'm just like, oh my God, she just said the word bread. Like, how remarkable that she said the word bread. And we asked her where her arm was, and she held out her arm. I didn't know she knew what an arm was. And she's like, it's these little tiny miracles that are just like, it's remarkable. It's incredible. And they sound so mundane, like cliche, but yeah, it's God, it's amazing. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of people who don't want them, which is fine too. A lot of people who can't have them, which is a whole another level of feeling sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel I understand. Yeah, no, I understand the tragedy of not being able to have kids and want them. I think there's well, to say I understand it is probably a
right. There's a difference between sympathy and empathy, right?
Right. Yeah. I feel like having had kids, I can much better appreciate the depth of the tragedy of like that was something that Sarah and I were thinking about a lot when we were first trying to have kids. Of like, what if we're not able to? That's a possibility, and yeah, I feel incredibly fortunate that we do. And yeah, like a part of this also is that we're living now every day with this reality of like how much more vulnerable are we as people that we've opened ourselves up now to like, my gosh, the amount of things that can go wrong now having kids, and from the mundane of just if she gets her knee scraped or to it's very possible that she could have something that means she needs to go to the hospital to tragically short life. That like, man, the sort of macabre joke that Sarah and I tell is that this came from a story. I may have told the story already. I can't remember, but when we were getting married, my mother-in-law, Sarah's mom, was telling us about how when she was pregnant with Sarah, she was thinking, if I can just get past the first trimester, then I'll be out of the woods, because most of the problems with pregnancy happen in the first trimester. So if you just get past that, then you're good to go. And then after the first trimester, she was thinking, well, if just after Sarah's born, then I'm out of the woods, because once she's born, there's like a lot of problems that can happen until then, but then I'm out of the woods. And she was saying at our wedding, just last month I was thinking, if only Sarah gets married, then I'm finally out of the woods. So the joke that Sarah and I tell now is we just live in the woods now.
Live in the woods.
Yeah, there's an infinite number of things that can go wrong, and
and after that, I guarantee that the grandmother is now worried about the baby. So still in the woods.
Yeah, it doesn't end. I'm reminded of the Boys Like Girls punk rock song. Who said that it's better to have loved and lost? I wish that I had never loved at all. I disagree with that song. No, I think given the choice, you open yourself to the vulnerability. You choose to love, knowing that everything will inevitably be taken away one way or another, and it's the beautiful tragedy of life. So that's fatherhood. let's talk about something else. So the last time we talked. What were we talking about? I think I was still working the Fileinbox. I think I was still sort of feeling this frustration of I was picking up some smaller consulting jobs, but hadn't really settled on a reliable way of getting more contracting jobs. And Fileinbox was something I was still struggling to grow. And I like that. This has happened. Gosh, maybe 2 years ago now. I think I had this expectation that if I just opened myself up to that, I'm open to consulting, that jobs would start flooding in. And when that didn't happen after a few months, I was like, this sucks. Where is the money? Where is the work? And I landed a great job with a friend of mine from college that was for a substantial amount of money. It's called Stacks. It's this platform for sort of like Steam, how Steam is app store for independent game developers. It's one centralized store where you can buy stuff from a bunch of different developers. They're building that, but for audio plugins. So right now the audio plugin landscape is very fragmented. Everyone has their own Shopify store or whatever where you can download the plugin, and it's a lot of these developers have to build stuff from scratch if they want to do subscriptions, and the installer ecosystem is kind of a mess, and the way that authentication is handled is kind of a mess. So they got some VC money to build a store to be like a centralized version of this, and they contracted me to build the MVP. And I think 90-ish% of the code. Do you know Dave Setia?
Yeah.
He's an app called Rika. Yeah, Dave. I subcontracted the native app this time.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was wonderful. And I paid him a good amount of money to build this part. I couldn't have done it without him. I appreciate his help on so much. Like he understood the native part of it through Rika, which is a native app running on Tower. He built like the installer and the native app part of that for this app. And then the web part of it, outsourced most of that to a junior developer who I've been working with for, like the last year and a half now. His name's Ryan, and then hired Ryan's friend to do more of the front end work. So that's been fun. And like, I could totally see a future where I'm just doing that sort of project full time. I've really enjoyed a lot of it. I really enjoyed like having more of the higher level discussions and kind of orchestrating the work to be done. And something that I've realized I really like is making really enticing to-do lists for people. So like breaking down client requirements into like, okay, these are the technical requirements that need to happen. And then being able to give those to someone who like, it feels very straightforward. Like for me to be able to give a straightforward, rewarding job to someone else is rewarding for me.
Right.
So that's been fun. And I stumbled on a quote recently. I think it was from Elon Musk. He was saying that the best managers are really good individual contributors who have management thrust upon them.
Sure.
And in several of the conversations I had with Dave, he expressed that like he was really enjoying this project because like me giving him the requirements, like I don't fully understand all the native stuff. I don't fully understand how Tari works, but we were able to have a lot of high level conversations of just like how things should be structured and how to do things securely. That if I didn't have as much technical understanding, if I came from more of a management background, I think I could have made much prettier spreadsheets and could have like organized things on a Kanban board much better. Sure. But I wouldn't have been able to have those conversations with him, and I think he appreciated being able to talk about that more technically.
The real big difference I find between technical and non-technical managers is that with a technical manager, first of all, they probably sort of understand what's going on, even if they don't, you probably sort of understand the native process. And then the real big difference is you can tell a technical manager, like, we can do it this way and it will take 4 weeks, or we can do it this other way and it'll take 2 hours. And they will instantly understand that is possible. Like some non-technical managers don't like get why like such a small change is like, like something is easy versus almost impossible, right? Yeah. And it's just far easier to communicate that to them. And I've found almost that alone makes technical managers better, because they deeply understand that trade-off.
Yeah. I'm reminded of this adage I'd heard of that it's not good to outsource things until you can do it yourself badly.
Sure. Yep.
So like if you're trying to build a house and you're hiring people to do drywall work, if drywall is just magical to you, like, right, you're not going to be able to have constructive conversations with the person, and you're not going to be able to like understand what the trade-offs are of doing drywall one way versus another. If you have some level of understanding of what actually needs to happen, actually very similar to working with LLMs. If you understand the core thing that the LLM is doing, you can work with it much better than if the only thing you understand is like, is this thing done or not?
Right.
If you can't understand more of those technical trade-offs, you can be outsourcing much better. So through this process, so the way the contract was structured, they give me half up front and half on delivery, which was supposed to be on the 1st of this month, but there were like some things to wrap up, which I hated. I really like.
There always are.
I know, but I thought we were going to be early, and then I was like, oh, we might hit the deadline, and now we're going to be maybe a week and a half is what I'm still hoping for late. But at one point in the middle of the project, so I had outsourced to Dave and Ryan and Ryan's friend Manu. So that's 3 people. And at the same time on Rootabl, which I'm about to talk about, I had 2 people that I was paying to rewrite it in Rails, and then 1 person who I was hiring to fix bugs in Next. So that's 3 for Stacks and then 3 on Rootabl. And then at the same time, we hire a babysitter while Sarah and I are working. So that's we're at 6, 7 people. And then we're redoing our kitchen and we were hiring our brother-in-law to help us redo the kitchen. So that was 8 people. That were just like money, just like
Yep.
And so the kitchen is almost done, so that's ending, and
Nice.
the stocks contract is ending. So like those are getting cleaned up, and then the Rootabl I think is going to condense to like me and just one other person on Rails. So, but yeah, that's the most number of people I've ever been actively paying at one point. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Beats
Yeah.
me.
So
Yeah.
yes. That's Stacks, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but the season of life that I feel like I'm in right now is to try to focus on fewer things and do them better.
Hmm.
I think I've been looking for is just like, here's the SaaS product that I'm working on, and I'm only concerned with these things, and like that's making the most amount of money, so I can kind of like carve out everything else. And it's looking like Rootabl has fantastic potential. Like it's checking a lot of my boxes of what a good software as a service business needs to look like. And so I'm very intentionally like, I landed this great job with my friend, and I'm very intentionally handing it off, finding a person who can continue working on it in the future. And like I'm not looking for other consulting.
So to be clear, or to catch people up, so Stacks is the thing that you're handing off,
right?
And Rootabl is the startup you joined or co-founded or
that
something.
I'm now a co-founder on.
Co-founder.
Yeah. So
of.
Rootabl
Okay.
started as a consulting job.
Okay.
I had gone to Craft and Commerce, the conference from Kit, nay ConvertKit by Nathan Barry. And when I went to the conference, I was at the time trying to grow the video clipper thing.
Right.
And one of the conversations I had was with this woman named Laura Sprinkle. Sprinkle is her actual last name. It's not like a fake internet name.
It's a cool last name.
German, I think. Yeah, isn't it? And so I had a follow-up conversation with her where I was trying to do some like audience research of, how do you think about social media and how do you think about clipping? And in that conversation, she mentioned that she was hiring this development shop to build a affiliate platform for her, and she was wondering if she could just like double check with me about the technical things they're doing, because they wanted to build it in Haskell, and I was like, that's strange, but yeah, you could
very
do
niche.
that. Yeah. And their justification for that was like, because it's this real-time tracking platform, you like need the speed of Haskell.
I'm sure it's because they knew it the best.
Right. Yeah. And then so I basically explained that to her, like what my hot take on that was. And then she said that their response to that was like, oh, well, then we could just build it in another language. And I was like, well, that smells kind of fishy. Like, why did they choose Haskell if they don't? Like, if they're really good at Haskell, go ahead and do it in that. But if they're willing to just change it to whatever you want, that,
right.
I don't know. I trust them a little bit less. And so she had a round of being very disappointed by what they had built and dropped something like tens of thousands of dollars on it. And then we had a conversation where I was like, well, I do consulting. Like I could just do it for you. And she was like, really? You could? Like, yeah, let's do that. So I took over their contract and built the first version of it on Firebase, which was a terrible decision retrospectively. But I was in a Firebase season in my life.
Yeah.
And that sort of grew into this co-founder relationship where I have now, I'm not getting paid for it, but I have a substantial amount of equity, enough that I am a co-founder. It's a 40-60 split, which we put that into a bunch of like co-founder calculators.
Yeah,
that seems fair.
Yeah,
I've invested some of my own money in this now to help develop my co-faster. And I think what convinced me was like, there was one client she had. So Laura's background is in being an affiliate manager. She's been an affiliate manager for something like 8 or 9 years and has worked with a bunch of people that I'd never heard of, but apparently are gigantic in the core space. People like, do you know who Amy Porterfield is?
No.
Neither did I. she continually makes fun of me for not knowing who she is, but this person's huge apparently in like the online course space. There's also a brand called
ask her who
Travel.
ask her who David Heinemeier Hansen is.
Yeah. Patio 11. Like, yeah,
right.
We all have our niche internet celebrities. So yeah, I joined this project, and I think in the first conversation she had, she was name dropping these people with the intention, I think, of being like, so I'm a legit person because I've worked with all these people. And I was like, I've never heard of anything. Like,
right.
Sure, you are a lady, whatever. And in one of the first campaigns we were running, I think I can. Yeah, it was specifically with trade and travel. I was at the time doing some debugging on the function that is ingesting the webhooks from Stripe, and so I pulled up the logs just to see like some of the things coming in, and I was looking at the logs and I was like, oh, I'm making a mistake. Like these are coming in way too fast because I must be doubling or quadrupling the stream coming in of the events. But then I dug into it and I was like, oh wait, but they all have different email addresses. That's weird. Oh, and they all have different Stripe IDs for the order. Hold on, no, they're just making money absurdly quickly. What the heck is going on? And what I came to realize was online courses are a huge deal. Like it's a gigantic industry that I had no idea was so huge.
Right.
And that's Laura's primary background. That's like who she knows the most in this space. And the more I started thinking about it, the more I have felt this internal alignment of something that I lament in the way that the world currently works is that teachers are tragically underpaid. And having online courses is a way for teachers who are rock stars to be paid like rock stars. I've seen campaigns where people have made literal millions of dollars in like under a month launching these courses. That, like, this solves so many things. Of in a traditional school system, there's all these layers of bureaucracy and like administration, and also the curriculum is designed in this weird top-up way where it's not necessarily actually useful things. But if you have an online course, you can really target that at like, I'm going to teach people how to raise Nigerian dwarf goats. And this is something that I'm passionate about, that like I think is improving the world. That if more people had more goats, it'd be more sustainable. It's fun having goats. That's marketed to people who actually want to learn it. And then if you're the world's best teacher in how to raise Nigerian dwarf goats, you're a rock star in the Nigerian dwarf goat raising space. You can you can be paid proportional with like actually delivering value for people. So yeah, Oh, and then like the model of affiliates is the way Laura talks about it is, instead of paying money to Mark Zuckerberg or Google, no offense to Google, you can be paying money to like your best customers and your friends. And then from a business perspective, it's like having this on-demand sales team that you only have to pay when they're actually delivering. So I kind of see it as this, like, I think more affiliate programs in the world would be better for the world, because it's a way to like spread out the economy. In a normal state of affairs in capitalism, usually it's a Pareto distribution. It's a winner take all of, the bigger companies get bigger, and it's harder for individual people to create their own business. Things like affiliate programs, of like easy ways for smaller businesses to take advantage of the concept of sales teams, help to spread out that Pareto distribution. You get a thicker tail now on the economy. So I would so much rather have fewer people like in corporate jobs who are just moving papers around and operating at 10% efficiency. I would so much rather have those people making courses that they're passionate about and like directly helping people and teaching them how to do things. And right now it's just focused on online courses, but we're expanding into I think software as a service businesses would be a good fit for this. So like the Microconf community, online communities we've expanded into. We've partnered with Mighty Networks, so we have an integration with them now of if someone has a Mighty Networks community that they'd like to grow through affiliate programs, we can help them do that. And then on my end personally with work, I've realized Sarah told me this like 2 years ago, and I was like, no, that's not right. She said, you're a much better CTO. Like, I don't think you want to be a CEO. I think you just want to be a CTO.
Right.
And I threw a little fit and was angry. I was like, no, I want to be the boss. But no, like, yeah, I enjoy being the CTO so much better. Like, customers just kind of come in. This is the thing that I think microconf people in general perpetually struggle with, is how do I do marketing? The way you do marketing from this perspective is you find a co-founder who already has the market, who knows what the problem space is and has the relationships. And so, that's been working incredibly well. So that's the work thing that I'm putting all my eggs in right now, of how might we grow this platform. And we had a like executive retreat session a couple weeks ago, thinking about where do we want to be in 10 years and what's the purpose of Rootabl, and then working that all the way down to what are the goals for this quarter. And it feels very aligned. I feel very optimistic about it. And that's where the majority of my work focus is going into right now.
Cool. So it's you two and some contractors, is that right?
And Laura just hired someone to help with the customer support part of it. Revenue is growing surprisingly quickly. I think Laura was expecting it to go really quickly, but it's been growing at like something like 80% a month.
Nice.
We were at I think like $500 a month something like 3 months ago, and now I think we're at something like $3,000 or $3,500 a month.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's fun. It's like fun to work on a thing that people are actually using. That's growing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, did I hear? I don't know if this is a good time to switch, but I heard that you were hiring these people to build it in Ruby on Rails.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So, yes. So this is a great segue. Yeah. So where do I even start this story? So when I was working on Fileinbox.
Yeah, I could start the story by saying I saw you flail around with Cloud Functions for a long time, and I was like, "That's what you like? Go for it, man!" but yeah. So that's my perspective.
Yeah. Here's sort of where this came from. I built DB-Inbox, the first version of Fileinbox, when I was right out of college. This would have been like 2013, 2014. I think I was 22 years old, and I had taught myself Rails in senior year of high school, and built DB-Inbox while I was still in college, and then launched it as a product afterwards. And there were so many things that I didn't know what I was doing on the technical and the marketing side. And one of the things that I really struggled with was servers crashing. Retrospectively, there was actually a very simple solution to what I was doing. I had structured it in a way where I was DDoSing myself anytime people.
I've done that before.
Specifically, so Fileinbox is a way to receive files anonymously from people, and so I make these portals where if you're a business that needs to receive files from your customers, you send this portal to your customers, and then they drag and drop files into the website, and then it gets sent to your Dropbox or Google Drive. And sometimes people would drag and drop like thousands of files at a time into this site. And what I was doing was making a separate web request for every single file. So I would directly upload to S3, get the URL from S3. So this is all happening on the client side. And then I would post that URL to the server. And then for every post, I would have to write a document. And if that failed, I would try again. And so if it was thousands of files, it would start clogging up the tubes, and the responses would start going slower. And then it was this cascade effect. And so I had to learn how to do load balancing, but then the things were still crashing. And I still haven't addressed that problem, but I would just go through this panic every time this happened, because I would start getting customer emails, and it was just me, and I'm this young 20-something-year-old, and I would just felt so bad to have people emailing me saying it's down, expecting a response, while I'm actively trying to get it back online.
Right.
So I would just feel this panic of oh my God, do I respond to these people? But then it's going to be up later, and I would just feel so bad that it was down, and I'd be apologizing to them on the email. Really, really stressed me out. And so after running this for, I don't know, something like 4 or 5 years, so this would have been, I don't know, 2016, 2017-ish, maybe later, maybe 2018, I think is when I started it in earnest. I started hearing these rumblings of the zeitgeist of the future of development being serverless. And I what a breath of fresh air that I would no longer have to think about servers and provisioning servers. Oh, the Heartbleed attack happened around this time also. So I was scrambling to log in and upgrade Linux, but doing it in a way that wouldn't take the app down. So that just really freaked me out. So the idea that I could just push code and have it automatically scale and then automatically go down. What a perfect low stress way to live my life now, that I just wouldn't have, I would be paying Google to be my DevOps team. And yeah, it would cost a little bit of money, but it would cost money in the sorts of instances where the app is making more money. So it's no problem.
Right.
So I spent probably something like 5 years sort of going on this path of the serverless architecture. Learned all about AWS Lambda functions, learned all about, when I discovered Firebase, what a beautiful, I don't even have to worry about the database. The database can also automatically scale up and down. Perfect. And it's real time also. Oh my gosh, real time updates are so expensive otherwise. You just kind of get that for free. That's so cool. And offline, I never actually figured out good offline support, but there was a promise of right. Offline is going to be really easy. And all of that is true, but the downsides aren't worth it. And the downsides are, yes, your app can infinitely expand, but so can your bill. And this never happened to me personally. Actually, no, it did kind of. not quite to this extent, but I kept reading these stories of people getting these runaway functions that then would charge them like tens of thousands of dollars in a weekend. And most of the stories I saw, it was like, the company would reach out and say, "Oh, we're going to forget this bill," but you're kind of like beholden to them of like, please don't let me, I know this is in the contract, but please don't actually make me pay you $20,000. And I really don't like that idea of like being beholden to them. And then also things started feeling kind of gross about Next.js, which I think it's probably the best JavaScript framework, but it's not actually a framework. It's a marketing tool to sell Vercel hosting. Sure. It's open source kind of, but like they're really trying to move the framework fast enough and make it esoteric enough to host yourself. They really don't want you hosting this yourself. It's such a nice experience just pushing to Vercel. They have all the GitHub integrations and everything. It's really a marketing tool for Vercel. And it's not a batteries included thing with Rails. There's so many other things that you have to figure out of. This is more a critique of the JavaScript ecosystem in general, but like Rails does everything for you. And something I didn't quite like about that is there's a lot of magic that if you try to go off the rails, you're kind of lost. It's automatically including all these functions and all these variables, and I didn't really know where they were coming from and what the magic parts were and what it was actually doing behind the scenes. Something that was really refreshing about the JavaScript ecosystem was everything's explicit. Everything has to be imported. You can do things in a very functional way where there's inputs and outputs and it's cleaner and felt easier to test. And I no longer feel that way. Like Next is it's like part of Rails where it's doing the compilation and the view layer, but it doesn't really have any opinions on how you're doing the data fetching. And so like even just making the two choices, I'm going to use Next.js and I'm going to use it on Firebase. Well, I could be doing Firebase in the front end, or I could be doing Firebase in the back end. And once I realized that a NoSQL database wasn't a great fit for doing this Rootabl stuff, that I wanted a relational database, found Supabase, which is great. That's like a drop-in replacement. I didn't have to change anything else about my stack. I could just sort of swap out the database layer. Well, now there's like 4 different ways to integrate Supabase with Next.js, and I was trying to find someone to help me with some of the development work on it, and both people I interviewed had 2 different ways of getting data from Supabase. There's like these functions that you can run inline with the like on the server. I don't even understand the terms anymore. Like when it's gotten so complicated. Like when you're fetching, right. It started off that these things were all single page apps and it was just one statically compiled file. But then they were like, oh, let's split it up so that we can make the bundle more efficient. And then Next.js was like, well, we can actually dynamically render some things and statically render other things. And that was kind of cool because you could do like OG image generation. But now it's like we can fetch the data on the back end and then dynamically make these functions where within a single component, some of it's happening on the back end, some of it's happening on the front end, like reconcile all that for you. And like,
you just reinvented a server.
Yeah, exactly. we're kind of just back to Rails, but with more steps. Right. And it just feels bad every time they do it because like the more server-side rendering that Vercel is doing, the more money they're making because I'm paying them for every millisecond of execution on this. And, a really straightforward example of this that I think is kind of gross is by default, if you include an image tag in a Next.js app, they pop up a lint error that says don't use the image tag, use the capital I image tag that's a library from Next. And you might think like, let me fix this error, let me import this thing. But what they don't say is now you're paying Vercel for more advanced image hosting. Like they're going to automatically transpile this for you and like they're going to charge you more money for it.
Builds it, instead of using a cached something or other. Yeah.
And I don't like that. I think that's kind of gross that they're telling you that you have an error in your code and the error is effectively you're not paying us enough money. Like, no, I don't like that. So I've like from a philosophical standpoint, Next is still really cool and React is still really cool, but the trade-offs aren't worth it. And like I started reading a bunch more essays and like watching talks from DHH. And he had this great line in one of his talks where he was saying like, what an unbelievable scam that these serverless hosting providers had convinced developers to be scared of computers. Like that's what we do. We work with computers. Like, what do you mean you're scared of servers and you need someone else to do your servers for you? He launched this thing called Kamal, which makes hosting on a regular VPS much easier. And so hosting on a VPS with an open source database, like you're beholden to no one. You're using these servers that are all commodities. If you want to get a $5 VPS, you know that your costs are going to be capped at $5. Um, Servers have gotten so cheap and so fast that, like, on some of the benchmarks I've been doing, it's so much faster and better than doing this magical serverless thing. It's supposed to be faster. And the model of MVC, of like we fetch all the data on the back end. We have these defined models of model view controller, and the model takes care of everything from the database, and the controller handles all the authentication layers, and we fetch all the data in the controller and then massage it up and move that to the view, and then we deliver the view. Is such a cleaner model. There was a bug that I shipped to production for it was live for something like 6 months on Rootabl, where because of one line of misconfiguration that I had in my database security, which is how they want you to handle security. They want you to, well, one of the ways that they recommend
Right.
Interacting with the database is having the client talk directly to the database. And so to do that, you just need the configuration file that says, like, based on the user, here's the documents that they can access. And so you might write a rule something like, if there exists a record that in the campaign users table that has a matching campaign ID and a matching user ID, then allow that user to rewrite, delete the record. And so I was debugging something in there, and was trying to get one of these RPC functions to work, and it didn't have the right permissions. So I added this line to my isAdmin function of checking if users in admin that would also check, is this running on the server? And so I got that to work, and then went about my day. And then one day, Laura texts me and says, "Hey, I'm able to access data for this private campaign without being logged in." And she showed me a screenshot, and I was like, "Oh, Laura, you simpleton. No, you can't. You're obviously logged in, being able to access this data. But just so I can be super sure, let me try to load this." And so I loaded it in an incognito window, and it loaded the data. And I was like, "Oh, no." and realized that line that I had added to make the function work was giving admin access publicly. And it was just like nothing happened, because there were also checks in the view layer of, like, you'd have to know what you were doing to be able to take advantage of it. But the fact that was able to slip by me was just like, this is awful. And Rails is so well worn. It's battle tested, and it's this framework that's existed for, gosh, I don't know, 11 or over a decade, where that sort of problem doesn't happen, because like there are pitfalls, but everyone knows where the pitfalls are. If you have the model view controller thing set up correctly, if you've set up your controller helpers correctly, of pop people out of this controller if they're not authenticated, that sort of thing doesn't happen. So yeah, I've come full circle. I feel like I can fully embrace now the Rails ethos of convention over configuration. It's so much nicer just having everything automatically imported. I don't have to have those every single time I need to import a file, importing it. I understand the magic much more happening behind the scenes, so I feel like I can appreciate that. If I do need to go off the rails, I can do that. It's so nice being able to follow best practices of, like, if you're a Rails developer, you could probably jump into any Rails project and know what's going on. There might be one or two weird things about a project that you have to get used to. But if you're a Next.js developer, every project is completely different. Of, like, how are you doing validations? How are you building forms? Even within the current code base, within our code base, that, like, I wrote most of it. There's like 5 different ways that we make a form, and that's too many ways. There should be one way. And, like, my gosh, the sorts of things that I'm struggling with in Next should not be things that I'm struggling with. So that's my story of coming back home to Rails. What are your thoughts?
I have several thoughts. Can we take a 1-minute break first?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, hold on. We're back. I have several thoughts about this. This is it sounds like what I'm doing with LLMs right now, which is ignoring them for a while, and it's what I did with Rails. So with basically Next. I stuck with Rails, right? I did do React for a long time, but I sort of ignored Next because I don't know. I wanted to see how it played out, and it still may become a thing. But I think I saw the writing on the wall that there was a lot of ways to do things, and I was like, I'll just stick with what works. And now you're coming back around. So I don't know. I feel I feel a little like sometimes it's nice to not do just the latest thing.
I admire your wisdom. I think I have more wisdom now that, like, the next time this happens, I think I'll be able to recognize it.
I don't know if it's wisdom or laziness. I like to, it's one of the two. Yeah. And that's not to say people don't do great things with Next and like super JavaScript heavy, serverless stuff. But yeah, it's not exactly how I wanted to develop, so I just didn't. And sounds like you're coming back around. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also it is interesting. The other thing I was thinking of is when you had that one configuration line change, that is also what I worry junior engineers. I worry they'll have that experience with LLMs coding for them. So this goes back to our previous point as well, which is like in Rails, you can skip the admin step if you add like, skip authentication for, whatever. And some junior engineer may, run an LLM and it's like, I can't access this endpoint. All right, we'll just skip the authentication step, right?
Yeah.
And so that is part of my hesitation with those as well. Also, yeah, I don't know. It's been an interesting journey to watch. So I'm interested to see how it unfolds from here. Maybe in another couple of years, you'll hate Rails again.
Be back on the other side.
Yeah.
I will say I'm really glad I went on this journey. As a general principle of my life, I'd like to be able to make the argument on both sides of an argument, like better than most people can. So if I hadn't had that experience with Next, I think I would perpetually be in doubt of myself of like, well, maybe that is the better way to do things. And wow, that deployment actually does sound really easy. And this snippet of React code is really nice for being able to do like, client side validations and not have to make a round trip to the server. That is really cool. Maybe I should be doing that. And it's the same sort of thing with like political arguments or like different parenting philosophies. Like I really value being able to deeply understand what the argument is on the other side. I feel this perhaps not at times entirely healthy, but this urge to like, if I hear something that I disagree with, I like, I gotta understand it. I gotta unpack it. I gotta understand what's going on here. This comes from partially it comes from a lesson that I learned when I was taking improv classes in Dallas at the Dallas Comedy House. One of the rules of improv, and the way they say a rule is like it's a high probability choice. Sometimes the funniest thing that can happen is if you break the rule, but the high probability choice is not to explain someone's behavior by saying that they're crazy or stupid. So if someone comes into the scene and they say they have a chicken on their head, the high probability choice is not to say, wow, here comes Joe. He's crazy. He just does crazy things like put chickens on his head. Get out of here, Joe. You're stupid. The funny thing to do is to find a reason why that makes sense in the scene. So you might say something like, oh man, the doctor still couldn't remove it, huh? Like now you're interested. Like, hold on, what? the doctor, did it grow in his head? Is that how did this? It opens up more possibilities.
Right.
And in the same sort of way, like when I hear someone that I disagree with, I really want to understand why they hold that viewpoint, why they say that. So with Next.js, like having gone on this path, I can make such a good argument for why Next.js is an amazing platform. Like you don't have to worry about DevOps. You're outsourcing all that. It's going to infinitely scale. You don't have to worry about your servers crashing in the middle of the night. You don't have to worry about if you get this huge influx from of people coming in from Hacker News. Like stuff's just going to automatically scale up and scale down. Whole bunch of cutting edge features of like compilation and React is such an amazing framework, being able to make complicated things, but in a simplistic and enjoyable way. Very straightforward to instead of the magic complexity of Rails of like you don't quite know where things are coming from or what the naming conventions are and having to follow this esoteric set of rules. It's very explicit. There's a React component has input as a function and has output, and that's HTML, and it's going to react to those live updates. Beautiful, simple model of doing it. I need to be able to make that argument in order to argue against it. And so that's what I've valued of like going on this journey. And as part of this, like I've emerged from it stronger. I have a deep understanding of how this serverless architecture works. And there's a part of Rootabl that's going to stay on the serverless infrastructure. There's one function that I can still very clearly justify needs to be serverless, and that's the function that ingests web page visits, because that that can scale drastically up and down. Like that's
Right.
dependent on our users' traffic, and so depending on which users are having a promotion at the time, there was a month where we had something like I think it was on the order of like 3 million visits on one of our user sites in 1 month. And so if we had 1,000 people doing that, they could all spike at the same time. That's a thing that does need to scale.
Right.
So yeah, that's like having an understanding of how that serverless infrastructure works. That now I have this other tool in my tool belt that I can pick up and use when it actually makes sense. I feel like I'm now in a stronger position.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree, and I'm similar, but I take the lazy approach, which is I just keep doing what I'm doing, and I let people like you explore the other side, and then I get the report back from what you did.
So much more efficient. You're spending so much less energy.
Right. Yeah. No. I agree with that too. But it also goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is like you have to go through the pain. I think you said it about parenting, right? Like you have to go through the pain in order to get the highlights. You went through the pain of serverless, and now you can actually use it as a tool, right? And I think everyone has to do that in whatever they're doing. Like I'm watching my kid practice piano and trombone now, and like every kid, he's like, I don't want to practice, but he gets so much better when he practices.
Yeah.
And you can find ways to make practice fun, but like fundamentally, it's like practices just work that you have to do in order to get better.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably a similar thing that you just journeyed on.
You gotta put the reps in. You gotta go through the pain yourself. I've experienced this already with Isabella. She'll do things like I sometimes wish so much that I could just sort of like tell her what to do to avoid pain. Like
right.
She was closing a drawer yesterday. We were visiting her grandparents, my parents, and she was closing the drawer with her hand in the drawer. So like as you close the door, she was squishing her fingers, and it was so funny. She was closing it with all her hands, and she closed it, and she was like trying to push on it, but then she was like, "Oh, wow!"
Right.
And she looked at me like, "Why does this hurt?" But she was still pushing on it. And then something that we found is like the when she's in situations like that, instead of freaking out about it and be like, "Oh my god, you're hurt," like she tends to cry more when we do that.
Yeah.
We just kind of like calmly explain what happened.
Yeah.
And then like that seems to be what she needs the most in that moment. So I was explaining to her like, okay, look, you were trying to push it like this with your fingers in there. Oh, ouch, that hurts. But if I push it with a flat hand, then okay, it goes in straight. And I would love to be able to tell her that before she experienced the pain of closing the drawer. But sometimes you need your fingers to hurt to be able to like see why there's a problem there. Because I could just brain dump on her like, Isabella, you want to make sure your code is always dry and do not repeat yourself and stay away from serverless. But like, no, that's not what I want for her. I want her to like be able to, because I am most certainly wrong about a lot of things, and so I don't want to teach her. I don't want to teach her what the codified rules are. I want to teach her the process of being able to discover those things herself, and part of that is going to involve like having to experience that pain. And the meta process I want to teach her is how to experiment while working to minimize pain and risk. It's like Facebook's motto of they graduated from move fast and break things to I think it's move fast with scalable or with stable architecture or something like that. It's the infinite dichotomy of life, of like the convergent and the divergent. It's the creation and the destruction. Like there's a balance between how risky are you, how much chaos is there going to be in your life, and how much stability is there going to be in your life, and you have to kind of walk those two lines. So that's the meta process I think I'd like to teach her, and so that's what I'm going to embody in my development pursuits. Gosh darn it!
Yeah. It can be really hard with kids too, obviously, because you want to protect them from harm, but by protecting them from harm, you're really causing more harm later. I mean, maybe the thing is like maybe like you don't know with kids because it takes 20 years and you get one shot. So
right.
Yeah, maybe I don't know.
Prepare the child for the path, and not the path for the child. I don't want to protect her from the world. I want to raise her to be capable to face the challenges in the world.
Yeah. At the same time, like you got to give yourself grace. Like there's another comedian that I can't remember, but he's like, oh, there's 5 years of therapy right there with what just happened. It's like, yeah, all right,
that's good.
Sometimes,
it happens. I'm not going to be perfect. I think I used to feel much more of a sense of stress of like, I gotta like make sure that I've read all the parenting books.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good to have some of that for sure. Like if you go in totally blind, that would be really bad. But yeah, you can't stress out either because that's bad for the general family environment too. So
yeah, I think I've been surprised at how minimal the set of uh, parenting things that are non-intuitive are. What do I mean by that? Like I didn't know that babies aren't supposed to have uh, uh, soft cheese.
oh sure,
I knew about honey. Uh, there were some other foods like that were. Oh, when I was surprised by like the foods that are classified as choking hazards, especially when she was younger, like peas they're not supposed to have because they can inhale those. But so many of the other things I feel like are just if I'm just like paying attention, it's like, oh yeah, well, if she gets hurt, let me like experiment with a few different ways of approaching that. And the thing that seems to work the best is if I explain to her what just happened in a calm way, and like I'm not making a big deal about it, and I'm also not telling her like, oh, you're fine, don't worry about it, because that's
right.
kind of like lying to her,
right?
Yeah, minimizing and yeah, her feelings are real. But that's the sort of thing that I think I had read something about that, but like it also just feels right. And I've been surprised at how much of parenting seems to be going incredibly well just by surfing the vibes of like, this feels like the right thing to do right now. And later I might see a justification of that of like, oh yeah, this actually isn't peer reviewed and whatever. If
right.
This is the best technique of how to develop a growth mindset or whatever it is. Yeah, I feel much less stressed out about that sort of thing than I did before having kids.
Yeah. Parenting.
There's one last thing I want to talk about, which is Fileinbox.
Yeah.
My perpetual magnum opus. So you may recall there's been this serverless migration that I've been working on for Fileinbox.
Yeah.
That's taken so long, I no longer believe that that's the best infrastructure.
Excellent.
So that's one way of getting it done.
Yeah.
And actually, it ended up working out really well because I never fully migrated to the new platform, and so like having come full circle of actually Rails is a fantastic platform to be running Fileinbox on.
Just don't DDoS yourself.
Like, remigrate it. Yeah, just don't DDoS myself. I don't have to remigrate it. I just have to like there are surprisingly few things in the new code base that actually need to be brought over. There's like a handful of features. I think primarily that code base was just like a fantastic learning opportunity for me to like see this new architecture of building things and to really learn how Next.js works. And there was like a new style that I brought in there, but yeah, surprisingly, like having built two separate code bases, moving the good parts of the new code base to the old code base is a surprisingly easy thing to do to move it back in Rails. And there's like, I don't know, 5 users that are actively using the new platform that need to be migrated back over. However, in this ethos of trying to focus more of what I'm doing and like take fewer responsibilities and do them better, I don't want to be working on Fileinbox anymore. And so I did some soul searching of like, do I sell it? Well, I don't really want to sell it, and also that doesn't feel safe. I've talked to a few people who like sold their version of Fileinbox and regretted it later. That like it's kind of nice to have this thing in my back pocket of it's still making money every month and takes very little maintenance, and I have a lot of like emotional attachment to it. It's the first thing that I made that made real money on the internet. Yeah, so I don't want to sell it, but I also don't want to work on it, and I also don't want to like be paying a contractor to work on it because I don't want it to be costing me money. And I really, when I was doing the soul searching, I was like, I really want someone who like would take responsibility for this in a way that a contractor wouldn't. I think I've been looking for, can I hire someone to do customer support? Well, if you're doing that, like the job they have to do is to answer the emails. They don't like deeply care about it in the same sort of way that like a retail worker doesn't care if if a bratty customer comes up and is like, I got bad service, they're gonna be like, okay, goodbye. But if you're talking to the owner, they're gonna be like, okay, well, I care about this business. I want you to have a good time. Let me make sure you get what you need. So I was reminded of this developer named Ben, who is graduating college this year, who has done some work contracting Fileinbox. So like he's familiar with the code base, he's familiar with the system. And I was reminded that we had a conversation at one point where he's really into Laravel, and he had mentioned in one of our conversations like, I could probably rewrite this in Laravel and it'd be much better. And at the time I was like, no, serverless is the best way to do things. And so I reached out to him and I was like, what sort of arrangement would make sense? Like here's my come to Jesus moment of like, I realized Laravel and Rails and systems like that from a philosophical development perspective are actually preferable. So, what would it take for you to like own Fileinbox and potentially rewrite it in Laravel? Like, I'd like for you to feel autonomy of what that would look like, and talk with him about sort of like the high level thing that it's at. And I shared with him the strike data of it, and the number of users, and sort of what I was thinking from a development perspective. And the deal that we came up with is a deal that I've never heard of before, but it feels like a fantastic alternative to selling or just perpetually working on a thing. Here's the deal. He gets 100% of the amount that he's able to raise revenue by for 6 months. Mm-hmm. So revenue right now on Fileinbox is something like $3,500 a month. If he raises that to $4,500 a month, he gets $1,000 a month for 6 months. And we still have to kind of work out the minutiae, like if it goes up and then back down, but we'll figure that out. We'll have a spreadsheet. Right. And then after 6 months, he gets 50% of it, and I keep the other 50%. And this to me feels like a win all around. I win because I'm having one phone call an hour with him. One phone call an hour.
A week?
1 hour, one phone call a week.
Yeah.
Only one phone call an hour. One phone call a week, where I'm acting much more as like an investor and advisor, but he has autonomy over the project. Like he can do whatever he wants. He's doing customer support. He's like planning new features. And then if things go well, if my hypothesis is correct, and like there are some low-hanging fruit things to do that would grow this as a business, 6 months from now, I'm just going to start getting more money. So that sounds great. The business is growing. So that's not only that like getting increased cash flow, that's also that this thing that I still own 100% of is now growing in value. So if I sell it, there's going to be a bigger payout. Great for him, because he's coming right out of college. He's going to have this remote job. And so the Fileinbox is going to be a thing that he's doing on the side. But this is a way for him to be growing passive revenue. And my deal with him is for as long as he's working on it, this deal holds. He's going to get 50% of the amount that he grew revenue by in perpetuity. And if he ever decides to stop working on it, all of the revenue drops to that 50%, and then it expires after 12 months. And we might do like a graduated thing with like, I don't know, we'll work on the details of exactly how that'll work. But, from his perspective, he gets to kind of inherit this project that already has some traction, that already has users, that's existed for a long time, that has this roadmap that like, I think I feel like it's a great deal for him. And then the users of Fileinbox finally have someone who like actually cares about this for the first time in a long time, where the answers to their emails aren't just like, oh yes, just wait for the new system, this will all be fixed. So I was delighted by finding that deal that I think works for everybody.
I actually really like that, because it is a win for both you and for him. One of the main things that people right out of college struggle with is finding like a real world problem. Like if they want to go into business, say, finding a real world problem and then solving it and getting money. You have figured out a problem, and so he can just use his tech skills to like do that. I think he will learn a ton. Like working directly on a product like that will make him learn a whole bunch. He can make money. You get what you want, which is maintain your money and your equity, like their money coming in. It's great. You say we have to work on that. I would think about things like what happens if you sell, what happens if he wants to bring on a customer support person, like who pays for that and how and all that stuff. But overall, I think it's a really interesting thing that I'm actually surprised I haven't heard more people do, because that sounds, an agreement like that sounds like it benefits both of you. So that's cool. Yeah.
Thank you. There's some initiative we worked out of like, if you wanted to spend money in some way.
Right.
I think my loose mental framing for that though is like, if I mentally categorize this as if I'm an investor in the product, that's kind of an established relationship of what it looks like if there's a founder investor and like the founder wants to spend money for a project. And like from my perspective, I think I'm just going to try to answer the question. Am I spending money to make more money? And if that's true, then yeah, spend as much money as he wants to spend.
So yeah, but say he makes $3,500 a month now, and he wants to hire a support person for $3,500 a month.
Yeah.
Does that reduce your income to zero? Or does that put his delta at negative $3,500 a month? Those aren't the same thing.
Yeah, you're saying so revenue right now is at 3,500. He's making $0. You're saying if he doubles that to
say he raises that to 5,000 a month. So he's making 1,500 and you're making 3,500.
Yes.
And then he wants to hire someone for 3,500 a month.
Yes.
Revenue is still at 5,000.
Yes.
So he would still be making 1,500 and you'd be making zero.
Yes. I think well, if I was an investor, how would I think about that?
Well, investors don't take dividends. I mean, it's not quite the same.
How might that work?
It's a good question to think about, I think.
It is a good question to think about. If he could make the case that like hiring a support person is going to make this business a lot more money, then I'd be like, yeah, do it. But if he's hiring the support person because he's like, I don't want to be doing customer support emails anymore, I'd be like, no.
I mean, there's a lot of things businesses can spend money on that take 12 months to work, right? So what happens in those 12 months? I don't know. I would think about certain things you may want to spend money on and how that affects your and his payouts. Yeah,
it's a good question to ask. I think my vibe currently is that I'm much more willing to spend money than he is. Like I've hired copywriters and I think our understanding of the project right now is that all of the work that needs to be done is work that he would be the best person to do.
Right.
He would be. That was a strange sentence.
What if he wants to turn on ads? Then he wants to spend $1,000 a month in ads. Does that come out of yours or his chunk?
I think so. Like, if he wants to spend his own money, do whatever you want. If he wanted to, if he wants to subvert all of my objections, it's his money. If he wants to use that to buy ads, and then he's going to recoup. If he can recoup the money of that within 6 months, then that would be a great way for him to be making more money. And he also has available to him the option of, if he can convince me that spending $1,000 a month on ads is a good financial investment on my part, then I'm certainly willing to invest $1,000.
I think that's reasonable. You just may want to codify that and just be like, you either have to convince me to spend my money or you spend your own money.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have that explicit conversation with him.
I mean, you may not have to in the short term. Like, I don't know, but I would think about
it. The baseline level of this that I think makes it work is like, I've just worked with Ben for a while. And I think we both trust each other, and it feels like we're both on the same page. And certainly I wouldn't want to just have some rando off the street, give them admin access to my database. Like that's risky and not worth it. I think the core of this that I think is helpful is like I've known Ben for a long time, and we've done a lot of work together, and I trust him. And I feel confident that anything like that comes up, we'll be able to find a resolution to.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that was. How much time do you have? do you have 5 minutes?
I have 33 minutes.
I have a quick question for you then.
All right.
And I've actually really enjoyed this. I might want to do another episode like once a month or something. If that would work for you, we'll follow up in DMs or something. But what's your take on Bluesky? What do you know about Bluesky?
Like Next versus Ruby and LLMs versus not LLMs, I have ignored it until now. I actually don't use Twitter almost at all anymore. I do go on there just to see because a lot of AI researchers are very active and they talk about research and papers on there. So I will read a lot of their feeds. But I have tried very hard not to do much social media lately. That may change, and so I may have to look up Bluesky, but I've kind of just ignored everything that's going on.
I think this is one take that you have that I think you have a better take on than I do. Probably. It's not using social media is probably the best thing to be doing, unless you have a thing that you're trying to promote or talking to people can be fun. Do I even want to? I'll say briefly. Just like
Sure.
I've seen an argument of people who are very excited about Bluesky, and the argument goes something like, "This is a brand new open platform that feels so much more fun, like Twitter used to in the early days of Twitter, where it's so much easier to be your authentic self without like trying to game the algorithm and get more engagement." Because it's an open platform, like Twitter used to be with their open API, you can build a lot more cool stuff on top of it. There's this thriving ecosystem of like people building cool apps on top of it, and particularly for people who don't like the ideological bent of Elon Musk, it's like this safe haven of like finally there's this space that's not overrun with Nazis. I think would be
Sure.
And I disagree with all of that. I think there's a how do I say this concisely? And also, it's I'm like you don't care because you're not using the platform. But
I think there's a very I just listened to Aaron Francis's latest podcast, and there's a very nuanced discussion there because he's used it more than I have, and so they talk about it more there. They get into some of what you're talking about too. Like people say it's more fun over there, but like, is it really, or is it just kind of new? And like, you know, like you could be saying the same things on Twitter. And they had an interesting discussion about view counts. I guess Bluesky doesn't show view counts. Is that true? And
that might be true, yeah.
People on Twitter feel bad if they have like 100,000 followers and they only get like 1,000 views on something, then that feels bad. But if you have 100,000 followers on Bluesky and you get like, 30 responses, that feels better because you're not seeing the view count. So I think there's a lot of interesting dynamics like that are going to work themselves out. Also, Bluesky is brand new. Like when it gets a whole bunch of people on it, it's going to have the same problems that Twitter has, right? Like, or a lot of the same problems. So like with spam and stuff, like people are going to spam Bluesky as soon as it becomes, like profitable.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know. You can keep going with yours, but it's not that I don't care. I just don't know.
Yeah, fair. I think perhaps I'd like to listen to the episode with Aaron Francis because I think what I'm craving is to like have a debate with someone who's and I've had this with a few people asynchronously, but yeah, I think
I think you should try to get on Aaron Francis' podcast then and have a debate with them.
That'd be fun
because they both know more about it than I do.
Were they both arguing like pro Bluesky? I don't remember the name of his co-host, but I think his co-host was
Ian, right?
Yeah, I think Ian's very pro Bluesky, and I think
their podcast. No. Sort of mostly technical is the podcast.
Yeah.
There you go. They both had sort of pro and cons, or like both see both sides. I think. So
okay, I'll just put this out there then into the ether. I would love to talk with someone about X versus Bluesky. I have strong opinions, particularly if the phrase "the vibes on Bluesky are so much better," if that phrase resonates with you, I would love to better understand your perspective on that.
Yeah.
And I have a strong counter to it, so I'd like to test my hypothesis out in the real world. Great! What an amazing episode, Chris. Thank you so much for joining. And
we should do this more than once a year, probably.
I would enjoy doing this more than once a year. Yeah, things got a little crazy with the baby, but now like I have a rhythm and a cadence of getting work done while being a parent. And so yeah, I have more space to be able to do this sort of thing. I'd love to be able to like get your hot take again on things like rootable decisions. That would be very valuable. Yeah, and also it's just fun chatting. We don't really catch up when we're not doing the podcast.
No, I think we've talked once or twice on Twitter DMs, but that's it. Yeah.
I'd love to be doing this more. That'll be fun. What do I say at the end? I forgot.
You say that's all you got.
Oh, that's right. Chris, is that all you got?
Or no,
I say that's all I got. Chris, that's all I got.
That's all I got too.
Then I'll see you next time, whenever that happens to be. Goodbye.
All right. Bye.